of our main virtual machines in Azure would be equal to me buying one new host every year. So it just, that's the math I came up with. So it was way cheaper for me to stay on site.
Yeah.
Office 365 was just a no-brainer because it was actually way cheaper for us to move our mailboxes and not run Exchange here. That was actually cheaper and easy to see the cost savings, but the rest of the infrastructure, I couldn't.
A better way to run this.
Right. All right. That's a pretty broad topic. Add that to the list. Anybody else got anything that they want?
Okay.
That's a fun topic. That's my love language. I like that. I like wireless stuff. So
along those.
Leadership lesson 1, ask for something bigger, and then the middle thing that you thought was big won't be that big.
Yeah, it's called anchoring. That's a persuasion technique. It's called anchoring. I love it.
No, it's just, yeah, anyways. Thanks for jumping in today, guys. I'd love to hear your questions. What we'll do is we'll keep this kind of as an open format. Zoom isn't a tool I use a lot, but I think we could do 2 different things. Just kind of raise your hand, wave at your screen, and ask a question, or type it in the chat. The chat will be, it looks like, for everyone, but we can filter things through there if you'd like. And so, anyways, if you don't know who I am, I'm Tyler Vance. I lead the IT teams at Life Church. That includes, everyone has a different flavor of what IT is in their organization. So I always like to kind of explain that. For us, that includes the direction of site reliability engineering for all of Life Church, YouVersion, Open Network, those products. It includes our data strategy team, a typical infrastructure team, a support team, which handles our help desk and our hardware. And then we use a ROC product RMS, ROC RMS product. And so we have a product team for that. And then just a general operations team. So that's what our flavor looks like. And I can answer questions in that arena. But I'm sure we've got a lot of gifted leaders here in the room to answer anything we have. So what are things that you guys are facing, challenges you're looking at? What are ideas or ideations that you have that you want to bounce off the wall with other people? I'm open to all of that and let you guys guide and direct what this time will be. So everyone jump in at one. I know nobody likes to be the first, but somebody has to be.
My big thing right now that I've been working on pretty hard for about 18 months is data-informed decision-making. And yeah, I see lots of nods. And there's like, there's a wide range of ways of investing in that. I would say that all my investments so far have been in the nature of experiments, relatively small amounts of money, forays kind of out there, like a, I don't know, an explorer or some kind of an advanced scout, running out there and seeing what the territory looks like and trying to get an idea of really what it takes organizationally to pursue that with a lot of energy. Like what does it really take in terms of staffing? What does it really take in terms of investment in tools? And what does it take in terms of outside expertise, professional services, contractors, right? So I feel like I'm feeling my way through that. I have been participating in the Glue Lighthouse group with Matt Engel, and that's been really interesting. But so that's a topic basically is how do you think about that in terms of priority for money? How are you resourcing it? What do you think your next steps might be? I'm interested in all that.
Okay. What I'll do, Cliff, is I'll kind of let everyone kind of share, hey, this is something I'd like to talk about. And then we'll kind of go back through and hit the list. That way we don't consume an hour on something and somebody's sitting going like, man, I wish I would have been able to ask a question, right? And so I know like Jonathan Evans wants to know how in the world he can move to the Midwest. I hear that a lot from him. And, you know, I just keep telling him,
I don't think anybody's asking that question.
God called you where you're at. You just got to stay there sometimes. What else you guys got?
First of all, the Midwest is great. I don't know what the problem is. With you guys saying that. So
Yeah, Sean, you're right next to the
Cliff's with me.
Cardinals.
Yeah.
Have you been to the Southeast?
Yes, I have, and I'm happy where I'm at. I have been to the Southeast, yes. No, I guess my thing is probably two things. The first is, well, just slipped my mind. So I'm going to be quiet and try to remember what I was thinking before I got lost on that tangent.
Yeah, a topic I'd love to throw out just to get anybody else to comment on it is, you know, just the concept of how your church manages priority of well, really resources. I mean, yes, yeah, there's the money aspect, but really more of a time. You know, there's for us at least, there's always going to be an unlimited amount of things to do for a team like ours, and you know, especially in the world of things with rock and all of those kind of things where, you know, again, it's customizable and it can do anything. Anything requires time and money. And we constantly live in the world of, you know, so many different directions coming at us of things we want to do. And Tyler, I know we've talked about this many times. We aren't quite at that standpoint, but we've been in the middle of kind of implementing a new process to help resolve this. But I'm sure everybody can relate to the tension of too much to do coming from outside request, but I'm just anxious to hear other discussion around how teams are handling that.
Thanks for that, Jonathan. That's actually what I was thinking and I couldn't remember it. So I'm really glad that we are on the same page and struggling with the same things.
If you guys have been asked to do more in 2020, would you just nod your heads? Yeah. Okay. Have you been?
And 2021's worse. 2021 is expected to be even worse, and resources are going down.
Come on, Sean. We're not even there yet. Have you guys been given massive teams to help navigate through that? Okay.
Myself.
So we're all in the same boat. Okay.
Hey,
I get it.
To tag on that, is anybody have any great strategies for utilizing volunteers? I moved in from a ministry perspective, just being on the ground, you know, small group volunteers, that kind of thing. And any insights on, it's just a different beast having technical volunteers versus having small group volunteers. Anyone doing that well?
Yes, Austin. I also came from, I'm going to blow some minds here if people don't know this. I have no technical background. And you'll understand that if you talk to me for longer than a couple minutes. You'll be like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about at all. And I came from the pastoral side. And so one of the things that our operations team is actually primarily focused on engaging volunteers for our team. And so we've systematized it from a ministry perspective, but it works well in technology. It does transfer.
Cool.
It's different, very different, but it does transfer.
I'd love to discuss maybe, I mean, I understand there's project and task management within a department, but I'd love to hear organizational wide project management and task management, what people are doing to kind of bridge those gaps across departments working on big projects, and, you know, helping our executive team utilize tools that kind of help them see, you know, if we're all using the same system, we can all see what we're all working on, and helping them to have that window in. So love to hear from, and I hear the word business operating system kind of thrown in to that, where companies out there have an operating system they use as a company. And I'm curious if any churches are using anything that's successful.
Good deal.
You're expecting departments to play nice together?
I know I'm asking for a lot here.
Oh, what else,
One-
guys?
One of the things we've recently been going through that you brought up was ideation and innovation and managing that, which kind of ties into some of that prioritization of projects. But I think even just going over that ideation process, how you guys are managing that or going through that, how wide are you opening up that net? That's something where I've found for like the first time in my career, we're actually being able to look at like, hey, here's some ideas of things we can do, as opposed to just having to be maybe not reactive, but it always seems like other people are always setting our agendas, or something's on fire, so it has to be replaced, or it's break fix, or there's very little room to innovate or do something new. So we're getting to do that now for the first time, but just how to manage all that and turn that from an idea and kind of moving it into reality or a project.
Gotcha.
How do we deal with printing that is either shared through a Windows print server or somehow is using AD authentication, right? So again, there are solutions for that. I know Carl is a big fan of Printix, Printix. I really like Printix as well. There is some cost to it, but man, sometimes it's worth paying for the thing that makes your life and that of your users much simpler and easier and reliable, right? In the grand scheme of things, cheaper to pay for Printix than to continue to have to deal with on-premises servers that you have to replace every so often.
Does Printix support AirPrint?
Printix does not support AirPrint natively. However, Printix does support mobile device printing. See how I did that? You can go research that for yourself.
Yeah, you can. I mean, you can surface if you want to park a little desktop out there, you can surface things. Whether you should or not is the question Travis and I can debate later. If you want a native AirPrint experience in the modern world, my personal opinion is you should just be comfortable with whoever printing whatever. And I'm maybe a little bit more comfortable with that than other people are. Like I at the end of the day, I have had copiers sitting on leases that get paid per page that are just an AirPrint thing that sits out there on the network. And you know, maybe we have 200 pages a month of junk that somebody randomly sent there. But if I represent that to leadership as, you know, hey, this is the cost that it took you to get a AirPrint printer in this world, and it cost you, you know, $15 this month or $10 this month to have that. It's normally not that big of a deal. Like I understand that that's asking a lot for people to say, okay, we're going to have a copier sitting in a copier room that somebody in the lobby could technically print to. I'm not saying that that's the right answer. I'm just saying it's an answer that we've used before, and it's not as scary as we originally thought. I'll just leave that right there.
I'll just back that up, and I won't tell you how many printers I have available on Guest Wireless right now today across multiple clients. And guess what? So far, knock on wood, not really been a problem.
And we will typically,
sometimes as IT people, I think we freak ourselves out and we think we have to make it this ultimate tight security, like it's got to be the best, most perfectest everything ever. And sometimes that's not true. A lot of times as IT people, I think we put a whole lot of pressure on ourselves that is all self-inflicted. And sometimes we need to take a step back and go, well, maybe the easy answer is the right answer here. Or maybe we at least try it first.
Yeah, the AirPrint question is because we have a couple that are actually looking at being tablet-based only and not even having a computer.
Mm-hmm.
It is a solvable problem. It's not going to work with Printix straight out of the gate. And we went down a really long rabbit trail to say that, right? But there are solutions.
But if I was solving that problem, I would actually probably start with that tool and build from there. But that's a different question.
Right.
Yeah.
So okay, so back to how do we get rid of Active Directory, right? That really is the heart of everybody's, because everybody's saying, really what they're saying is we don't want to have servers anymore. And Active Directory domain controllers are the thing that we feel the hardest are to get rid of because everything else is so tied to that, right? So you start with the file shares, right? You start with communications and collaboration stuff. So your email is cloud-based, your file sharing is cloud-based. Then you end up with printing that you have to address, and then potentially with your Wi-Fi authentication that you have to address. And you may have some other applications that you have to address and deal with, right? But you end up at the place, what you're going for is this. You want to reach a place where you can look around and go, okay, literally the only thing that my domain controllers are doing now is they are authenticating users, they are providing DNS services, and maybe DHCP services, although you can move DHCP with no impact on Active Directory. So by the way, that's the easy one to move. Move it to your firewall, pick a network hardware appliance device to do it, something. DHCP is easy. Don't you dare move DNS until you are ready to turn off your domain controllers. Active Directory does not work without DNS being integrated. So just there's your cautionary right there. But the goal is to get to the place where it's user authentication, DNS, and DHCP. And when that's all that's left on your domain controllers, then the next thing is you have to figure out how to deal with user authentication, right? So Carl mentioned
user
earlier,
authentication, patching, machine policies.
Okay, device management is
Most people that have AD, I find, have some amount of devices bound to it. So after we have done, after we've removed everything else, we're typically down to the functions of an AD domain controller as opposed to just DNS.
Good point. Good point.
Yes.
So what do you do about device management and patching? And I would love for somebody else in the room to answer that question. Carl and I do this a lot. We talk about it a lot. I would rather hear from somebody else that's doing it.
Well, I've been on this path for a while, and that's why maybe I'm at the part of trying to figure out what to do with user auth and Wi-Fi. But all of my new machines, I've been getting directly from Dell with the what's autopilot. Mm-hmm. So we've been really I started Intune a while ago, and I found pretty much that all the group policies we had set on the domain controllers, like other than like 3 of them, were unnecessary. Like they were all either things that were already out of date, like it was a policy that didn't even apply anymore, or so first I went through all the policies and like, okay, what actually matters, and made a list. And then just Googling around and looking at the Intune documentation, it was pretty easy. And now with the Microsoft Endpoint Manager tool in front of Intune, it's even easier. So our new devices, I don't bind to Azure AD at all. And I found that it was pretty simple just to set up the things we wanted in Azure AD with Microsoft Endpoint Manager and Azure AD groups. So
I want to clarify something. You said you don't bind to Azure AD. Did you mean you no longer bind to on-premises
on-prem AD? Yeah. So they come out of the box with autopilot, with already in the Azure AD, and they're already there. I can hand it off to an end user. Other than just a few, like we still have a legacy ACS. So other than installing the legacy ACS client, there's a few other things that are like line of business apps that we can't that I don't have set. Otherwise, everything else, Office, everything comes down automatically when the user signs in based on their what's assigned to them.
That was very well. That's a great journey, and you're ending up exactly where I would hope that you would end up. I'm very heartened that's your experience and your landing place so far. I actually think I have something helpful to add to this, but I'd love if somebody else had like either where they're at in their journey. Maybe that's just the same thing. Or
I was going to say where we're at. We are about 100 to 110 client computers in our staff, between full and part-time staff. That said, all but 6 of the client machines are Macs.
Mm-hmm.
So we're running Active Directory, but I mean, okay, we're not using hardly any of the policies and anything like that. We've got Jamf managing all the Macs. We went to Teams and Microsoft Teams back in a year ago to Teams phone system in March. So pretty much this week I'm meeting with a couple ministry partners or departments to get their files moved from old cloud-based SharePoint to the Teams-based. So I mean, we're just around the corner from being able to finish this up. We've got things left where we do have paper cut that we use for print costing. I'd like to see it go away, but then again, we've got internal DNS, we've got some HVAC systems, our switches are tied to Radius. So there's just a few things like that that are finishing the migration and moving.
There are a few services out there. There are a couple of ways out there that you can go from AAD to LDAP by way of AADDS, and from LDAP to Radius with like a free Radius server running in Azure. Like it's a little bit of a, I don't love
acronym soup.
Yeah, that's a little bit of acronym soup, yes. And there's also third parties that will actually just use SAML or modern single sign-on to bind a Radius server right to a SAML endpoint. There's some cost associated with both of those. And I don't mind some cost. Like, I understand that's easy for me to say, but I don't mind some cost when it's actually like accomplishing something that the organization genuinely needs to accomplish. On the topic of switches, I don't know what your topology is. I would hazard a guess that overlaying a management VLAN on top of your switches, if you don't already have one, and I don't know what the benefit is to having Radius auth switches in an environment where less than 5 people are going to be managing it. I totally get it where I have 200 or 400 network admins in a giant global org. That makes sense. For 5 people, I think we could just move it over to a VLAN, put it on a jump box if that's what we need to do, and get the same benefits to the organization without any of the ongoing management headache associated with keeping the acronym soup running, or the cost of paying somebody else to keep the acronym soup running. Yeah. I would love to just kind of spit out. I'm going to talk a little fast here, and I'm going to see if I can do this in like 3 minutes. But I would love to kind of share, if we have other people on this call that are like, hey, I've got computers sitting on AD, maybe I've got a little hybrid, maybe I don't. I'd love to just kind of spit through what we do to kind of get from here to there, because like I can kind of go through this in a 3 or 4 minute thing. I'm going to talk a little fast. Please ask some questions at the end, because I think it kind of most directly, when I see somebody saying, you know, how do you do this? I'd love to actually give an answer to how we do this. I understand that it's going to be very compressed based on this timeline, but we walk into an environment, we have AD, we have traditional file servers, everything else. We have third-party apps that are tying in, we have some network Radius, whatever. Like we started with, we get rid of all of the easy stuff first, like anything that, if we can change around the network and get rid of Radius requirements, we start working on that. We get files up to Teams or SharePoint or wherever they go. If we have personal file shares, we use Mover or SharePoint migration tool to get those all into OneDrive. We yada yada yada. We do all of that work, and then what we do is we go into GPO and we build some links using directory, using Azure Active Directory Sync and some GPO policies, and we basically get all of our computers on the domain to be hybrid enrolled. So when we run a command, we can actually see there's a little bit of work in that, but we basically see all of our computers both in AD and in AAD. Then we roll out some more GPO policies that will bind those AAD enrolled computers into Intune. So now our computers are showing up in endpoint management, they're showing up in AAD, and they're still in AD. And then we do exactly what Jonathan was talking about as we go through, we take a look at all of our GPOs and we enumerate everything that there is. We remove everything from GPO except for these links that are basically making our AD devices talk to AAD. And we move them to Intune policies, and we rewrite them. We look at them with a really close magnifying glass, but we do that. Then the next thing that we do is we autopilot enroll all of the machines that we have now brought into AAD in Intune. There is a relatively straightforward way of sucking everything that you have brought into Intune into autopilot. At this moment in time, all of our machines are now getting their settings from Intune. They're no longer getting them from GPO. They are Intune enrolled and they are autopilot enrolled. And now what we're going to do is we're going to any deployment stuff. And so we're going to go ahead and put some work into making sure that like our OneDrive, our OneDrive is going to automatically set up known folder redirection, get their desktop and all the rest of their stuff up into OneDrive on their desktops and on their computers, and also configure it so that we're automatically joining the team sites that we need. So when we moved everything into Teams and we did all of that, there's going to be things that people want synchronized down to their machines centrally. So we're going to go ahead and get that scripted into Intune. This is relatively straightforward, but so that computers are automatically joining these things. At this moment in time, I should be able, if I have any line of business apps that we're pushing out, we may or may not, depending on what's required and how widely it's used, we may go ahead and package those for Intune deployment. But basically at this moment in time, what has happened is everybody's documents are in Intune, are in OneDrive. When somebody signs in, they're automatically being bound to the sites they need, like we're automatically deploying Office. We are pushing our settings through Intune. We are AAD joined, single sign-on is working. We've gone through a big push over the last year. We've moved most of our people on Windows out of Chrome into Edge, and we have, password synchronization, and we have favorites sharing, our favorites sync, and all of that stuff turned on. And at this moment in time, I should be able to go to a brand new computer out of the box from Best Buy running Windows 10 Pro, and I should be able to sign in with a random user's email and password, and I should have their desktop, I should have their apps, I should, there might be one or two things that you didn't choose to package that needs to be installed. If we're running Printix, I should automatically have printing. Like all of this stuff should automatically come to life. At that moment in time, we go ahead and we YOLO it. We just go ahead and nuke the entire organization at once from Intune and let all the machines re-enroll overnight, and just know that tomorrow morning is going to be a little hard, but it'll be over. And at that moment in time, like we'll do some spot checks and make sure that there's stuff in people's OneDrives. We'll make sure that sync health is safe, and we'll do a little bit of stuff, but we nuke them. But that process of them coming back is maybe a 20-30 minute process. We have done many hundreds of these now, and we see a failure rate way under 1%. And we go through, and then at that moment in time, now we have computers that are only on AAD, but they are still set up and working like they were when they were on AD. We change the DNS on the network. We shut down our DNS servers. We remove any Azure Active Directory sync stuff that we may have had in place. And depending on if Azure Active Directory sync was in there for a long time and stuff that happened with Exchange, we may do a little bit of cleanup to make sure that all of our emails are still manageable from within the online portal. This is being recorded, so I said all of that in a very quick way. I think I was, about 4 or 5 minutes there. You guys can come back and watch this if somebody's trying to do this themselves and they don't want to bring in a partner to help you handhold you through that. That will give you a pretty good time if you spend enough time Googling to understand like what is involved in each one of those steps. Does anyone have any questions?
While you guys think of questions, I will add this. Everything he just said mimics the way we typically would process through this as well. We might do things in a slightly different order, right? But the end result is the same. The one big difference is this. We have not yet reached the place where we have felt comfortable with the YOLO approach of literally wiping everyone's workstation and just having them re-enroll themselves. So there is a tool called ProfWiz that actually has a free version as well as some paid options available to it. ProfWiz actually will allow you on an individual workstation basis or in a scripted way to go to individual workstations and convert those local user profiles or what are currently domain user profiles on the workstation into an Azure AD profile for that user on that workstation. There's a whole process involved in that, but you can, join it to Azure Active Directory, convert the profile, and it does work. And we've done that many times.
We started there, and we actually ended up finding that like the 6 months when we captured the experience and like trouble tickets and issues with individual apps of migrating the profile just versus YOLOing it, like we had this opportunity where we can clearly communicate to users, there's going to be some disruption over the next few days while we do this. We've done all the preparation. We know that this is pretty going to be good. And they deal with that, any problems that they have in this very confined period of time. And then they go on to have a happy life. When we do profile conversions, and the reason I don't anymore is we tend to have very few problems on week one, but relatively far more problems over a 6-month period of time. And that erodes our time and their trust in our abilities. And so I want to like that option. I also come from a background where like we have to do, particularly in some of the higher enterprise work, like we have to have communicable and repeatable plans for crypto and DR and environment recovery and everything else. And so at some level, if I'm not willing to YOLO and rebuild an environment, like that just means my process isn't good enough yet, because like I may need to. And I like fundamentally, I love sitting down with our cyber insurance people and like, what would happen if all of your desktops were a problem? And I'd be like, oh, we did this last week. I mean, like whatever, just wipe them all. I don't care.
You mean Monday?
Monday, yeah.
Like that's what we do every Monday, right?
Yeah, we just wipe the whole thing. That'd be amazing. Sorry, it wouldn't be really amazing, but I like the thought process.
Now, I will say another option that has worked for us when we're rolling something new out is new hardware comes with new configuration. So if you want the new computer, then awesome. You don't have access to the local file share that we've been telling you not to use for the last 2 years. And that's where we're headed next year, because we're finally, weirdly enough, for the first time ever, doing a structured computer refresh cycle next year. And instead of waiting till the flames reach a certain height to replace them. And so we're going to, we're trying to do what you're describing. Actually, I think we're trying to get to where Jonathan Huff is. We're not trying to, YOLO everything and refresh, but we want to get to the point where we're deploying computers that are Azure AD only. Yep. And so for the last month, I switched PCs because I heard about this weird Azure AD thing and I didn't know anything about it. And I thought, I'm going to, as far as how to join a computer to it. So I just turned on a computer that I got from Dell and logged in with my Azure AD account, and magic happened. Like it blew me away how it worked. Like it just worked. Now that also revealed I need to probably limit things. Like
I would argue that it's not hurting you, and it's well, okay, yeah, but you need MFA on all your users. But I think we covered.
I haven't even entered my password into my work computer. It's so weird.
Yeah. It should be noted in your environment, and you maybe have already done this. I think I've mentioned it once or twice. I think Travis has maybe talked about it once. Something that entered into the Microsoft world mid last year, maybe even a little earlier than that, but certainly within the last year, is if you're running Azure Active Directory sync to push identities from your AD into your AAD, and that's currently how you're managing that. If you're running AAD P1 licenses, which give you like password write back and stuff like that. They're included in the M365 license tiers, or they're an add-on with EMS to the O365 license tiers. If you turn that on and you turn on hybrid machine join, which is part of this SSO stuff I was talking about a minute ago, if you have an AAD only computer that knows nothing of your AD sitting on a network where you still have AD, and you go to talk to that file server will know who you are by way of your computer communicating to AAD, and AAD communicating who you are back to AD through Azure Active Directory Sync back down to this file server. So we still have a few environments where we're mid-process of making this change, where we have already YOLO'd and all of our computers are off of AD entirely. If you look in Active Directory users and computers, there is no computers in there anymore. They are all gone. And if you look at a computer, it is not AD joined. It is not hybrid joined. It is purely AAD joined. I can still hit on-prem domain resources. That is an option. This isn't the time to talk about it. Hit me up later if that's something that you need to do.
I think, and Chris, just to kind of tell you about our process, we did the same thing that you're talking about, where every new PC, I started joining to Azure AD over time, and so I had, as the hardware refresh cycle kind of ended up, I eventually just got rid of the joining them to AD altogether, and so all my new devices are there, and I still have like a year or two, I think, of devices that I'm still waiting for them to turn over. But yeah, that's new setup. Here's the way it goes. You hand it out that way, and yeah, that's what we did.
Somebody Jim asked a question a little bit ago about NAS. Almost every one of the environments that we work at that has any media involved in it still has some bulk media, I should clarify, still has some NAS, or in some cases it might be a Linux cluster. I mean, there's different answers depending on your scale and your needs. Those are almost always free running. So there are passwords and users associated with logging into that have nothing to do with Azure Active Directory or anything else. Although a few cases, most all of those systems do integrate with LDAP. And so if that's something that you're like, hey, I'm just fundamentally uncomfortable with that, or I want a single sign-in experience, you can deploy Azure Active Directory Domain Services, turn on LDAP, and you can bind a Synology to AAD that way. It works fairly well. In fact, I think a growing number of NASs are actually bringing in direct SAML. So like I think that in the not too distant future, assuming you have a higher tier of AAD, you're going to be able to just point your NAS right at that. But the predominant number of them in the field are just running FreeARM. I don't know about yours, Travis.
Yeah, most of I put it in the chat. Most of ours, it's a handful of users, and so we typically just do local accounts. But we do have some that have done the Azure Active Directory Domain Services, AADDS, if you're trying to keep up. And then that does give you native LDAP functionality. It does require a VPN between you and Azure, and so there's complexity. And again, the question always is the complexity really necessary? Here's the way I always ask my guys.
You can hit LDAP over the open internet now.
Well, you could do that, and then that might be a place where maybe having more security would be a good idea. The way I always phrase it to my guys, and I can't take credit for coming up with this, I don't know where I heard it first, but is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Is it really worth all the effort to get that thing, or is there, again, a simpler, easier solution? I'm trying to keep up with chat. I think I've answered everything that's come through, at least with my perspective or Enable's perspective. What other questions? We've got 8 minutes left. What else do you guys have?
I'm curious about Teams phone system, Microsoft phone system, and
just do it. Just do it. What else do you need to know?
So here's a question I have on Microsoft Teams phone systems. We occasionally get users complaining about call quality.
Are you using Microsoft native calling plans, or are you using a third-party carrier to provide your calling plan?
We're using an Azure-based SBC and a third-party carrier.
So my gut would be that you should talk with your carrier, because the reality is Teams talking to your Azure-based SBC, Teams lives in Azure, so you probably aren't dealing with network latency between your SBC and Teams itself. You could be dealing with an underpowered VM running your SBC.
Okay.
You could have some issues there. That would be something to consider. But most likely, you want to be talking to your SIP provider and have them look at their connectivity between your SBC and them.
Most the predominant number of our Teams phone systems deployed are using an SBC in Azure and then a SIP provider for a whole bunch of reasons. Every one of them for a different reason, but most of them for a reason. And we have only had call quality issues one time, and that was on the SIP provider. But it wasn't even the SIP provider. It was that we were hitting a point of presence of theirs on the other side of the country. And we needed to work with their support to get a more targeted URL that was in our geographic region. And so we were literally hitting a combination of latency on top of expected internet weather. And so I'm not saying that's what your issue is, but I would agree with Travis. That's likely where your issue is.
Okay.
Not a common experience. I will say that, even with all the SBCs and stuff.
Because it's actually been pretty rare.
Yeah.
Been nice.
Recommend the domestic, like the regular Microsoft domestic calling plan, or using a third party?
Okay, so let's take a step back and let's make sure that everybody knows there are different ways to provide your phone service to your Teams phone system. I think that's the part that we want to make sure. Obviously, you understand that, Jonathan, but I want to make sure everybody does. So Teams phone system really requires multiple components. One is the phone system license that actually activates your individual Teams user to be able to use phone functions.
Like pink flag.
But then you have to provide phone service somehow. And you're familiar with this, right? If you have a phone system right now, you understand you pay somebody for phone service, and you probably pay somebody else who you bought your phone system from. Teams is no different. You can pay Microsoft directly and have Microsoft be your phone service provider as well. They provide different ways to do this. One is called it's the domestic calling plan, which basically is lower 48 access. And so that runs $12 per user per month if you want to do it natively. If you piecemeal, by the way, if you are going to do your phone system in Teams with a Microsoft calling plan today, you probably are better off to go get the now reduced price voice. What do they call it, Carl?
Microsoft Business Voice.
Microsoft Business Voice. It's
Yeah.
a bundle that includes the phone system license, it includes the calling plan license, and it includes the audio conferencing license. Yeah, the domestic calling plan. All of that $14 for nonprofit.
The
$14
nonprofit
for
one.
Yeah, it's $20 if you're for profit. Either way, that bundle of putting all three of those together in that bundle is cheaper than buying the piecemeal parts. Just as
now that you've established
that's relatively new.
Now that you've established that, why would you not choose to take advantage of Microsoft's?
Yeah, it's only
bundle?
about $1.80 savings though.
Yeah, it's not a huge amount, but it can add up depending on your size. Here's why you might not want to choose Microsoft as your phone provider, as your phone service provider. One would be the cost as you scale up. I can tell you roughly by the time you're at about 30 to 40 users, you can do it cheaper by not doing it through Microsoft. Okay, if you're less than 30 users, it makes a lot of sense to use Microsoft. The caveat being it is dealing with a big behemoth of a company in Microsoft. And unfortunately, what we've seen over the last, especially 6 months, imagine why, they've gotten a lot slower at getting things provisioned and getting phone numbers ported over and scheduling that process. And they're kind of difficult to work with because it's a lot of email based and you wait and wait and wait. If you've got patience and if the stars align for you, it totally works. It's a great viable solution. Just expect to need some patience to get that going. If you're porting phone numbers, if you're just spinning up new numbers, they'll give them to you lickety split. It's automated, right?
So there's some advanced routing and how to get from here to there that sometimes, like if you have on-prem phone systems and lots of common area stuff, there's sometimes reasons why SBCs might be the only real way to get from here to there. I'm going to ignore that and say that even as somebody, I'm putting an SBC into every environment, regardless if it makes cost sense or not. And the reason why for that is I still believe that phone numbers have value, and I am fundamentally a little bit uncomfortable by the surrendering of agency we give when we give that phone number to Microsoft. I understand we can get it back out, but the amount of control and options that I have when I own that phone number sitting in a SIP provider or a trustworthy SIP provider to be able to, we have a problem, I want to forward that, like I can't tell you how many times in the last 15 years I have needed to say, for reasons beyond any of our comprehension, this isn't working. And what I need right now is a carrier level forward to go over, send this to a Grasshopper system or send this to somebody's cell phone. Like I have forwarded a Fortune 500 phone number to a cell phone before because for reasons outside of anybody's comprehension, that's what needed to happen. You lose that ability the moment that you port that in to a very specific platform. And I kind of see the little bit of cost and extra overhead of an SBC as worth the options to get out of a future unknown, but that's me. So maybe that's another reason that I don't hear talked about a lot in a technical, like, should we use this or not?
So we kind of jumped right into the other way to do it. Besides having Microsoft provide your phone services, you can provide a device that can be virtual or physical called an SBC, a session border controller. It's the bridge between your phone service from somewhere else and Microsoft Teams. This is called Teams Direct Routing, if you want to look this up. And there are different ways to implement it. You can own that SBC yourself, or you can pay somebody else to host it for you. Some SIP carriers will let you do a per user charge and host it for you. So it does give you that flexibility Carl was talking about. But then you still have, it's anyway,
you got to deal with
it's not direct with Microsoft. And we are out of time. We're about to get kicked out of the breakout room. You guys have been great. I know we talked a lot. I hope this was helpful. Feel free to ask any other questions in Slack. Okay. Is it going to kick us out?
I don't know. It says 0 seconds.
We're still there.
Yeah.
You guys are still here.
I don't
know how Zoom works. I only know how Teams works, and they don't have breakout rooms yet. It's coming last October.
They're trying their best.
Waiting for Matt.
They are
should be
claiming that it
moving
will.
us.
They are claiming breakout rooms, by the way, in Teams in December now. That's the latest update. So
yeah.
Which December?
Lip service.
December.
20 or 21.
December, the new October.
Technically, they starts today. I don't know.
I'll just we're getting
41
kicked out.
seconds.
Yeah.